All right, what is up, people? How's it going? It is Sunday night again. You know what that means. Yakin with Yukon. And I got to tell you, and this is straight up with you people. This is the most excited I've been for Yakin with Yukon yet. No offense to any of our previous guests. Love you all, but it's not every single day your blood, the bloodline, is on Yakin with Yukon. So, I mean, I gotta tell you, I've been excited about this all week. I've been excited about this all day. That my brother Dan Henry from Henry Monster Designs is on, and I'm just so stoked for it and so grateful that he wants to do this and he wants to talk about his tremendous talent, which he's going to show you guys how talented my younger brother is. And I think you're going to be blown away by the amount of talent, the amount of equity, how his etiquette is, and just what a human being my brother Dan Henry is. So, um, very stoked. Also, if you guys haven't caught it this morning, we did another mental health podcast over on T3's channel. It's also on my channel if you want to check it out. It was me, T3, Dre from Suel's Geek Vault, JJ, LeBron, and Seth Bayer. So, guys, if you haven't checked that out, please go check that out. Again, very important stuff. That is going to be a monthly thing. I got to get with Carlos and find out exactly what time of the month we're doing it, but definitely stay tuned for more of that. Important stuff, guys. We talk about it all. We talk about faith based stuff. We talk about how to deal with things, being a man, all that stuff. So great stuff. Great time. I really encourage you guys to check that out on the replay and join us every month for that. So let me welcome a few people who dropped in. We got Gary's Grails. What's up, Gary? And we have got Duffman. Duffman, thank you so much for showing up, guys. All right, it's time. Let's bring in my little brother. Let's bring him in and let's get this show on the road. Let me cue up his music. Let's do it. Did you like that?
I absolutely like that. That's better than anything I thought was even remotely possible. But I have a quick question before you even get started. So, if we're the bloodline, does that make you the tribal chief? I'm sure Dad's watching; he'll like that too.
No, Dad's the tribal chief.
Oh yeah, okay, that's fair. That makes perfect sense, actually.
Just as long as you don't kick him in the head like Roman Reigns got. That's all.
Right. Good for you, Jimmy.
Way to go, Jimmy.
So, a little wrestling talk for you.
Introduce you. This is my brother Dan Henry. He, as you can tell, look at his background. Look at everything that this guys.
Which one's the scary mask?
Like right, which one's the scary mask? Right, guys, all handmade stuff. This is all stuff that he's made by hand, sculpts, paints, designs, all original stuff that you guys are seeing behind Dan right now. So, you know, I still get impressed. He showed me something when we were talking in the back for a while. I even had to ask him, like, "Did you just paint that?" And he's like, "No, I sculpted it." And I was like, "Damn, you're good. You're really good." Dan, thank you so much for joining the show, man. Really appreciate it. I know
Thanks for having me. Man.
Yeah, I know this is a different thing. We're not talking toys. We're talking Halloween. We're talking all about masks and everything else. And let's kind of start from the beginning. So, obviously, I know the answers to these questions, but our guests don't. So, where did do we want to call it an obsession?
I mean, sure.
where did your obsession and your desire for Halloween and masks and just the whole thing come from?
So ultimately it really comes from mom's side. You know, Grandpa Picorni loved like the old classic black and white horror films, and Uncle Jeff obviously made, he made props, and he would always have me or you or both of us come over and help him out. And so I guess those seeds were planted early, if you will. And I know our mom likes that stuff too, and I think Dad tolerates it, and, it's a family affair, if you will. The whole family. But that's kind of where it started. Like around the kind of like the later '90s, I started getting into like, I had an interest in like anything creative. I mean, and I found horror to be appealing. I guess as Rob Zombie would put it, it's because it's about seeing something you don't see every day. That's why horror is appealing. But it was a haunted house, for example, was a place for me to use all my creative wants or needs or talents. I could make the music. I could write out and design characters. I could sculpt. I could build sets along with you, of course. So it was the ultimate creative outlet. Is what I realized around 2002, probably. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So with that, we did what we would call and what everyone else would call a home haunt. So we we took our parents' backyard and we made it into a haunted house every single year. Um, Not always to the pleasure of our parents, obviously. They were gracious enough to do that for us. Gracious enough, thank you, mom and dad, again for doing that. To give up their backyard in the month of October, let us build a home. What do you remember? What do you think your fondest memory of the home haunts that we did was?
That's literally, it's funny you asked that. And I did not know these questions ahead of time, so I
No,
really
he
know. But
doesn't.
I just seriously did not. But that's actually one of the easiest questions in the world, because I think about that and I maybe to a fault stew on it at times, because not to get all emotional or whatever, but it's just the idea that I got to do something in our parents' home. Um, well, in Thornton, then when we moved, we were in the backyard, of course, so outside of our parents' home, but with our parents, with you, with our cousins, with our uncles, with our family coming over, and then opening it for literally an hour and a half
Mhm.
on one night. We're working on this thing for months, to have all the family come together, and then the neighborhood kids and friends and um, people showing up in costume and stuff, and just loving it. Everything that you and I worked tirelessly to do, and everyone else that helped. So I guess long answer is just how it helped us build our own community with family and friends. Like, you think at the time that it's about building the haunt, but which to an extent, but now, however many years later, 20 plus years later, you realize that was precious time with a lot of people you love, and that happened to be the medium you were working in. So
Right. Um, so, do you remember whose idea it was to start a professional haunted house? I remember, I can't remember his name. You have
uh,
to remind me of his name. What was his name that he kept telling us? He came through the haunt and he's like, Chris and Dan, you guys are so Yukon Phil. Damn it, use my real name again.
he's Chris. He's Chris.
um,
Okay.
who was it that came through? I can't remember his name. He worked in insurance. What was his name?
Oh, yeah, mom's old one of her friends' husbands,
Yeah,
Doug.
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 Doug. Yeah, so
Wow.
Doug.
Doug
Doug
was
was
one
a
of our
family
greatest
friend.
supporters, and
Right.
uh,
And Doug had a
yeah.
stupid idea that we go and we should do this on a fuller scale. Now, Dan, I want you to tell us. I'm not going to tell us about this haunted house. I want you to tell about it. I want you to tell us about what the theme was and what made it work and the unexpected twist to it that proved it to become the scariest haunted house in Denver for the year of 2010.
Oh boy. Okay, so for clarity, when we were doing the home haunt, what Chris, excuse me, Yukon Phil. Sorry.
I can end this right now.
I know. His middle name is Scott.
Shut up.
So what Yukon Phil is alluding to is, we had our home haunt, and one of our family friends, Doug, came through, and he encouraged us to go bigger, i.e. a professional haunt, public haunt, if you will. Um, so with very little research or knowledge or any clue as to what it takes to run a business and all that jazz, I had been laid off right around the same time from my job. So I was like, why not? And the grim reality set in of trying to rent a retail space, how expensive insurance is, what fire codes are, what dealing with the city, the county are, what zoning means, what ADA compliance means. How say there's a customer that wants to come in, but they're in a wheelchair. You need to be compliant for that, as you should be, obviously. And then the whole thing of budgeting and money and a business plan and a game plan and bringing in people like Ellery, massive help that he was and is as just a human being in general. Our friend Ellery, who he helped us tremendously. But but one thing I didn't learn, because I kind of expected, was the support, from obviously mom and dad, way beyond what they should have. Like, let's be honest, but that's just who they are. And so yeah, the grim realities were, to answer your question, is it's not just fun. It's not all fun. The fun was this much.
Right.
The everything else, and then hiring,
Yeah.
interviewing people, getting a management team. Like, it's not just a couple of guys throwing up trash bags for walls and putting in some Walmart props and charging people $20 for them.
Right. Right.
So if you're thinking of starting a haunting attraction, how do you feel now?
Right.
But
It's
that,
true.
yeah,
It's true.
yeah.
So what made Decimation work? The
So Destination was the name of the Destination Haunted House. If I will be completely transparent, which I will be, a lot of my personal motivation, I don't want to speak for you, Yukon, but I had frustration from just my life in a lot of ways, just especially being laid off. And I was in a new home living in Brighton, and I didn't have any money and things like that. And there was other factors, but my motivation for a lot of the design of it was just sheer anger. If I'm being honest, I had the idea of, like, people are paying us to scare them, right? Okay, well, let's go ahead and magnify that. Let's dump gas on a tiny fire and make it a forest blaze, if you will, and let's torment them. Let's make them feel some of my anger. And that was literally my motivation. I'm not saying it was okay, but it was.
Right.
And we did that. We were a highly reviewed haunted house. We were compared to some of the most shocking haunts in the country that I won't name. So people loved and hated it. It was one or the other, because we made the mistake of letting our actors say literally anything they wanted. Never do that.
No, that's a bad idea.
And it's ironic, because one of the funniest things that I came across doing the haunt was, you can have a very overly violent and bloody and gory haunt, right? You know, corpses, just the worst things you can imagine. That didn't faze people, but when they heard a curse word, that's when they would call the phone and complain.
Yep.
But
Yep.
you know,
Well, and it was something too that we adjusted to. So the first few nights it wasn't working out great, but then one of our actors dropped an F bomb. From there on, we were
they
like,
remain
"Hey,
human.
that scared people. Go ahead and do it. Never do that. Never. Uh, you guys have heard this phrase before. Never let the inmates run the asylum, because what happens is you lose control. And what ultimately happened with me and Dan was we lost complete control of that haunted house.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, we did get scariest haunt of the year out of it.
we did, but ultimately, what you're saying is the ultimate truth, because as a business owner, I mean, watch Kitchen Nightmares, for example.
Exactly.
As a business owner, and I've actually learned a lot from what Gordon Ramsay says on that show, of all things, is if your employees are, like you said, if the inmates are running the asylum and maybe they don't even respect you, if they don't think that there's going to be repercussions for any actions, you have nothing.
Right.
You know, you have nothing. So
Right.
we learned that the next year, I think, hopefully.
Yeah. Let's get into that a little bit. So the year one went. We won't go into too much details on that, but we actually did get an opportunity with a friend of ours, whose name was Nick DeHaven. Shout out to Nick DeHaven. If for some reason somewhere, wherever you brother, you're watching, what's up? But there was a school that he was a teacher at that came open, and we were allowed to use the school, the first floor. So Dan, if you can kind of tell us what the thinking was on that side and Decimation 2, and what kind of what you remember working out with that one.
That's what you call like a handed something on a silver platter.
Yeah.
As if you're a haunted house enthusiast, or maybe say something like that, like a filmmaker or whatever, and someone hands you an abandoned school. Wow. Like, that's kind of the ultimate.
Yep.
It's the ultimate prop. And but it was a lot better. Albeit our management, I financial side, quality side, the some of the people within the school board, I think it was, kind of held us to a bit of a standard. And while at the time, in my arrogant young age, I was mad about that, but in hindsight, that's actually a good idea, because I think that's the problem with the first one. We had no one to keep us in check. It's in this one we kind of had Nick and some of the school people kind of keep us in check a little bit.
Yep.
which actually is good. Having a blank canvas and being allowed to do whatever you want can be fine if you have self-control. But wanting to shock people and scare them without limits, you need kind of you need to have someone come in and say, hey, maybe that's a line crossed, but overall the experience was better. We kind of, got our feet under ourselves, if you will. But it's like any other business, especially when you have employees, there's issues, but it worked out better. I didn't leave it feeling so completely demoralized in so many different ways. And Nick certainly helped out in that, to his credit. And Ray came in, and he was like Paul Heyman. He was the wise man. He just brought this. He's like Anakin Skywalker. He brought a balance to the Force. I don't know what other analogy to use, but he was such a calming presence and an imposing figure at that. And as you were with the actors, it just helped. So getting the right people around you is key also, like in any aspect of life.
Absolutely. I just kind of give you guys an overview. So the way it really worked was Dan and I were in charge of design. And then Nick would help out. Ray helped out a little bit too. But ultimately, it fell on me and Dan's shoulders to design the hunt, come up with the ideas, and then for Dan execute them because I don't have any talent to execute that kind of stuff. So it was up to me to come up, me and Dan to brainstorm, come up with the ideas, and then for Dan to execute, which you see he is more than capable of by all the stuff he has behind him. So talk to us a little bit about that on, you know, I know this story, but just tell the people how you just kind of went for it one day. You just started sculpting with clay and you just came about things and how that kind of process looked for you and what you've learned from the early days of decimation till now.
Oh man, that's a fantastic question, because I've been trying to film some how-to videos where I have really been stressing in the idea of thinking of all that stuff because it directly applies. But what I did is, I don't know what day I woke up and was like, hey, I just need to actually try to make things from scratch. But I got sick, and I think you did too, of going to Walmart and picking out masks and store, especially when you don't have a lot of money, buying store-bought props as they are very expensive. If you go to some haunted house trade shows, you'll see what I mean. But people are charging for their time, as they should. But I think it's 2006. So I decided, I want to actually make something from scratch. So albeit like a mask or a prop, all the way up to an animated prop that can run off of pneumatics or electronic props that move, in other words. I decided, man, so for my birthday, mom and dad are like, well, what do you want? So I got on this website. It's called monstermakers.com. And as the name would insinuate, it's a good place to get materials to make monsters. So they make a mask making kit on there. It comes with the clay, the plaster, make your mold, the latex, the paints, everything you need, the sculpting tools, you name it. So I got one of those, and that was around 2006, like I said. And in my infinite young arrogant wisdom, I thought I didn't need to watch any how-to videos or anything like that. I was proven to be wrong. Seeking knowledge is good, but I just got it out. And the best thing for creative process, other than videos and watching things and researching things, or even a class if you want, is trial and error, and not being afraid of messing up. Because with any creative process or starting a YouTube channel, whatever it is, you're gonna have roadblocks and stumbling blocks, and it's a great way. And I think it's a huge avenue that God uses to give us patience, honestly, and to not rely on what we think we know, and be humble and say, you know what, I do need to listen to what this guy says that's been sculpting for 20 years and I've been sculpting for 20 minutes. I do need to listen. That's something that was missing severely in 2010 with decimation. The first year with me, I didn't listen. I thought I knew it all. So if you go into anything in that approach, you're going to fail. So it was a feeling out process when getting into making creatures and monsters. Like, oh, I think my sculpt's good, but you're going to put it online in a mask making group, and they're like, no, it's not, buddy. Right. If you ask for that criticism, boy, you better be ready for it.
Yep. So, you're going to get it. And I want you guys to know too that everything Most everything, not everything, but most everything that we did in our haunts was made by Dan and was made from scratch. Original ideas, original concepts, silicone based masks, which I wore. Oh, uh, latex props. Dan doesn't just make masks; he makes props, full size props. Full size costuming. Everything that you can think of, Dan either makes or has made um, in his career. Talk to us about Transworld. So I'm going to let you kind of explain to him what Transworld is, but talk to us what
Sure.
you've learned by going out there and the people that you've met and any tips that you've come away with doing that for. Well, you've done that for quite a while now. I'm not sure how many years, but talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So with Transworld, so it's a trade show. It's a haunted house and Halloween trade show. Nowadays, they kind of have trade shows for pretty much everything. I mean, obviously, the Doing Collectibles is huge, and Comic Cons, things like that, of course, which is cool. I mean, you kind of get all sorts of, you get the right crowds to the right conventions. But the professional haunted attraction industry has Transworld, and that's what it's for. It's not really about a like a convention per se. It's a trade show. They call it a business show, for lack of a better term. So after the haunt ended, around 2012, me and Ray, who we hired and worked with in 2011 at the haunt, we started a mask making company called Kruger Creations. And man, it couldn't have been more than a couple months in. We start posting online and stuff, and right away, people comment, you got to go to Transworld if you want to be successful. If you want people to see your product, you got to go to Transworld. Well, what the heck's Transworld? So we researched it, and Transworld is what I just said. It's the haunted attractions, the Halloween and haunted attractions show, essentially is what it's called. And so we went to a smaller convention out in Ohio first. It was called Midwest Haunters Convention, which still goes to this day. But then they're like, okay, well, we got our feet wet. You got to go to Transworld. That's all we kept hearing. So if you got some coin on you, you can go to Transworld, but it takes a leap of faith, if you will, just from a vending standpoint. So as you can rent 10 by 10 booths, 10 by 20, however big you can afford. That's the key there. But it's a massive trade show floor and there's literally hundreds of vendors. So you got guys making masks, and not just one or two, but probably 10, 12 any given year, guys making latex masks, guys making silicone masks, guys making costumes, guys making 20-foot tall animated fully moving props like you would see at Disneyland. You've got guys that are straight out of Hollywood building scenic designs and sets. You've got guys building pneumatic props. You've got makeup people. You've got, you name it. Like, it's, if you like Halloween at all, or think you do, or haunted houses at all, or think you do, maybe, it will knock your socks off. So yeah, that's what Transworld is. And so it goes Thursday through Sunday, and it's usually in St. Louis, the beautiful St. Louis. Sorry if you're from St. Louis, I didn't mean to offend you. Downtown St. Louis, let's say that. So it's a 4-day show, usually in March, and you have people literally around the globe come from there. It's not just around the country. We had ended up selling people masks from Spain, Puerto Rico, Canada, maybe as far as Australia. We had theme parks buy from us. So you have companies like Spirit Halloween show up there. You have theme park owners show up there. You have guys from Six Flags show up there. It's just insane. Thousands and thousands of people, but it's the place where the haunted attraction and vendors, the haunted attraction people and vendors do business. That's the place. So long-winded, sorry.
What do you think you've learned by having your products there? I mean, you've obviously got a good response because you've gone several times. Has anybody ever, offered some advice or offered good critique, bad critique? Kind of talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you want it or not.
Right.
So to answer your first question, what have I learned? You're not as good as you think you are. And that's not a bad thing. In 2013, Ray and I thought we had good product, albeit at the time with our experience. Yeah, fine. In 2023, if I look back at that product, am I going to say it's good and quality and everything and it's worth the money? No. That's just keeping it real. But you have people that are trying to they're going to go in there and ask you, why should I give you my hard-earned money? It's a valid question. Just like they should go to a restaurant owner. Why should I pay money for your food? It's the same thing. But they were very harsh at times. Complimentary, of course. We had guys like Glenn Hetrick, well-known Glenn Hetrick off of Face Off, compliment us a couple times. So you may have something like that happen, but then you have a haunted house owner that is, he's like, man, and you have to have thick skin because they're going to tell you whether, and they're going to scrutinize, and they're going to, what's he got going? What's he trying to hide here? What's he doing here?
Right.
But they should be, because they don't have unlimited funds, and they're working hard on their haunted house. As you know, Phil, is hard to do. It takes a lot of effort and time away from your family, a lot of money, a lot of labor, and they should have the right. Now, I'm going to give you $150 for one mask. This better not be like, something like something I ordered off of Wish. It better be quality, and we quickly learned it's not about quantity either. It's about quality.
Right.
There's vendors that got their start there. I want to say Immortal Masks. I think Andrew Freeman, nice guy. I think his first year there, and if I'm wrong, I apologize if he ever sees this. I think his first year there, he brought 6 masks. But now they bring like literally hundreds of masks. You know what I mean? But you start small. You have to be humble and start small and build your brand as you're doing. You build your brand. You can't just, okay, I'm new here. I know my stuff's good, buy it. Now.
Right.
So, it's humbling, as it should be.
Yeah. Well, and as I can see in the comments, we're being watched. So,
so
let me. You can't. Oh, okay. Well, I can. So, let me welcome in a couple more people. We're gonna save the best for last on this because we're being watched. But Colin, EC Collecting, what's up, brother? We have got the man Hollywood. Hey Archer, what's up, man? We've got the man Clicks. And then our father is on here as well. So. Mr. Jim Henry, how you doing, Dad?
He does what he says. He says he's going to be on.
He's going to be on. Yes, he does.
I guarantee
he wants to go back in time to a subject I know you're going to love. I know you're going to love this. He wants you to tell the story about the coffin.
Oh, the coffin story. That's beautiful. Yes. All right. I need to share this story more. I actually have shared it with a lot of people in life, but all right. I was working at ESM at the time. I want to get the year right. We were still doing the home hunt, I believe. I want to say it's 2008 or 2009.
It's somewhere in there.
One of those years. You were living in your house in Arvada.
Yep.
So after many years of doing the home haunted house, me being me without actually thinking things through, really, I was like, I got to up the ante somehow. And I don't even know if I included you on this, Yukon.
Well, you did, but go ahead, tell a story.
But you weren't going to moderate me and say, I don't think it's a good idea. You're like, that's a great idea. It's fine. I would have done the same in the reverse.
Right.
But anyway, so I was like, let's up the ante here. So I thought, can I get a real casket? I don't know why I thought that, because that's a staple in any haunted attraction. They're going to have real caskets, or they'll build coffins. That's fine. But a real show floor casket, man, like top of the line, like almost
used.
Gently used. Almost like you want to die so you can sleep in that in eternity. That kind of level of niceness. No, but so I got on eBay, and there was a warehouse that was like I guess they shipped out the casket. They were kind of like a middleman, if you will. Well, that warehouse caught on fire. So with caskets, they need to have a perfect seal. I don't think I have to go into details why. For obvious reasons, it has to have a perfect seal. So the smoke broke the seal on a lot of these caskets. So they were just brand new, just so we're clear, brand new, and they were just selling them on eBay. So I think it's 180 some bucks or something like that later. There's a flatbed pulling up in front of our parents' house with a casket on it. My mom does not like caskets or coffins, as most people don't. It's a rational fear. I just never cared. Well, our parents didn't take kindly to this, obviously. I received a phone call at work while I was working and kind of got my butt chewed, which at the time I didn't like, but in hindsight, years later, I realized that was the right call because that was not really showing respect for the household. And as just without telling someone you have caskets showing up to their house. I don't think
Right.
your average Joe is going to be cool with that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, that's kind of the casket story. It did not go over well, and we ended up having to store the casket at your house for a while, and then
There it is. There it is right there. Where did the casket go? Well, it came to older brother's house. That's where it
yeah,
went. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's where it stayed. And then the other thing is that's funny about that story too is one of my good friends, we had the casket. We were filming the trailer for Decimation, and one of my good friends who's a little decided he wanted to go ahead and sleep in the casket, take a nap in there, and close the door. So
well, he
yeah, I
pulled the
mean
lid
it's
out of my hand and insisted on closing the lid.
right. He did. Yes, he did. He did. So yeah, I mean, there you go. So the adventures of running a haunted house, buying
People
props,
probably think we're
buying
sick.
caskets. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. But I want to go back to what you touched on earlier about, it's always kind of a shot in the dark. The reason I was asking you some of the questions was because a lot of it ties into YouTube too, where you're kind of taking a chance. You and I were talking about this in the back earlier, where you're kind of taking a chance. You're taking a chance on yourself. All these guys in the chat all have YouTube channels, except for Dad. Um, but what you do with the YouTube channel is you take a chance. You bet on yourself, and you're like, okay, uh, are people going to like what they see? Same goes for you with the masks and with Trans World. You're going towards people who may have been doing this for decades, and you're taking a chance on yourself by putting in front of them what you do with the talent you think you did. Did you ever feel intimidated by that? Did you ever feel like, man, maybe I'm in over my head a bit. Maybe I need to, you know, try something new. Did you ever feel that way?
Man, yes and no. I hate that answer, but I'll explain why. I wished I had more. I wish I had felt that way more. Unfortunately for me, I didn't learn enough in those 3 years from where the haunted house ended and when Ray and I started our new mask shop. Um, I got onto the floor of Transworld the very first year and I had a chip on my shoulder, right? And he's the same old guy on here and these same old vendors. Like, those guys earn that.
Yeah.
I'm new. I thought that I got to be at the level of this guy that's been here for 20 years. That's insane.
Right.
You earn that. You work
Pay your
for that.
dues.
You pay your dues.
Yep.
Exactly. And I wish that I'd been more intimidated to where it humbled me. And it's weird because no one at Transworld or in this industry, especially at Transworld specifically, has ever been rude to me in the context of like knocking me down a peg. They just were encouraging. Even a guy that's making the same kind of, he's selling the same thing. He's making masks too, but he says, "No, good job, Ben. Glad you're here."
Right. Right. Right.
Man, that should humble you and be like, that's what you want. Now let me change my mentality and be like, oh, I'm going to be humble too. It's just,
Yeah.
it took some beatings that were very healthy. Suffering isn't always bad. But Ray and I both learned, and my approach now at Transworld is my new company's 180. It's totally different. So I wished I had been more intimidated, if you will. I know it may sound weird, but it's to keep me in check. It's like, how can you have an ego your first year at a show?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
My stuff is just as good. Well, no, it wasn't.
Right.
Right. Simply put.
Well,
So
sometimes you don't understand the full thing you're getting into. We didn't understand the full thing we were getting into the haunted house. You and Ray didn't understand the full thing you were getting into with your mask. But you've been doing the mask thing for 10 years now, right?
yeah, we started that company in 2012. We basically closed up shop. I'm sorry.
11 years.
Yeah, because we closed up shop in 2019. Ray moved to Vegas, and so 2021 I started my new one. So yeah, kind of off and on, but for the most part, yeah, about 11, 12 years. Yeah.
So let's kind of get to that. Let's get to the present now. So you've been doing this on your own with Henry Monster Designs for the last 2 years. Has it been a different, obviously a different mindset, but has it been something where you feel like you're more mature and you feel like you've hit your stride and you're in your comfort zone now and you feel pretty good about where it's going?
Oh, absolutely. Big time. I can't be grateful enough for how God has softened my heart to just appreciate this for what it is. It's not about money. It's not about getting the most compliments. It's not about getting the most followers on my Facebook page or being compared to this famous sculptor or painter or whatever. It's about making cool stuff, but enjoying it, being humble enough to learn more from other people, and meeting people and sharing ideas, sharing talents, as you're doing every week. And so with 2021 and starting my new shop, it's just like, man, I feel a lot better. And it was very hard to start it because and I've discussed, as we were talking before we started, I discussed this with Ray, my former business partner and still one of my best friends. Is it felt really weird working in a new empty shop without him. And it hurt a lot. Like, I'm making something new and I'm on my own, man. It's like, if I sink or swim, it's because of what I do or don't do, and I have nobody else.
Yep.
I've never been in that position. The haunted house, Crooked Creations, my last shop. So it's a motivator, and it's again, I'm a dead horse, kicking a dead horse here. It's humbling, but it needs to be, because when you get humble and you learn from other people and you appreciate what you're doing more, you're going to make better stuff. That's the whole thing. Like my stuff now, I don't want to compare apples to oranges with our old business because the style is completely different. But now it's like I spend an extra hour or two on every sculpt. I spend an extra hour on my molds. I spend an extra hour or two on my paint jobs. It's not about like, let's just get as much as we can done. No, someone paid their hard-earned money for that. You need to provide what they think they're paying for. You don't send a piece of junk. And then if they complain about it, get mad at them. Well, that doesn't make sense. So with this stuff, I've taken a lot more time. I've watched a lot more videos. I've learned more in the last probably year and a half than all the years combined. There's so many people like, I hate naming names, but there's some people, if they ever see this, like Matt McNeil, he is an amazing artist out of LA, has messaged me numerous times, building me up, complimenting me, encouraging me. Obviously the family, Ray, there's other artists out there like Jim Brown, who's encouraging, nice guy. The list is a mile long. It's like, dang, I guess this is what I wanted.
Right.
So it's just, that's the other thing, is timing.
Right.
It's not always in your time. Just because it's your first year at Transworld doesn't mean you're going to make $20,000 or $50,000 or whatever. So.
Sure. Well, and the reason I asked too, so again, this relates back to what we do as YouTubers. It's the same thing. When you get in, you feel completely alone, and then the more you do it, the more you see that everybody's going through that struggle too. You kind of get in with these guys, and then it's like, okay, we're all kind of going through the same thing. Well, yeah, and then we build this community. How would you say the community has helped you through your haunted house and, well, maybe not haunted house. That's probably not a good one. Through the mask making and stuff. How do you think, outside of family and friends, the guys that the guys that you interact with at Transworld, and maybe on a, maybe not everyday basis, but every once in a while, how do you think that that's helped you?
Well, it's helped tremendously, because every year that you're at Transworld, you do feel, no matter how many years you're there, with all these amazing artists and vendors and people and all these customers, thousands of people, and hundreds of vendors, just, it's intimidating a little still, which is good, as I alluded to earlier. But every time you go there, you still feel like a little minnow in a very large lake,
Right.
because you are.
Right.
You are. And just because a vendor's been around 20 years doesn't mean that equates to automatic success. And that's, it fluctuates with economy and everything else, as there's still money involved. But from a support perspective, outside of family and close friends that are going to build you up because you're alive, they do the right thing. But some of the names I mentioned earlier, but there's guys out there in the industry. I mean, Michael Edwards, who I work with now at Terror in the Corn Haunted House out in Erie, Colorado here, and Bart Butler and Michael Kneva, guys that work out there, oh my gosh, they just accepted me as a human being. I came into my interview with them a couple of years ago, having a hard time just in general with a lot of stuff. And man, they saw through it. They knew I was talented. They knew, I guess, I was a nice guy. But man, they just said, just so down to earth and kind. And so guys like that have helped tremendously. And then guys like that have, if you know haunted houses at all, Alan Hops. Alan Hops has come by my booth every year, no matter what. And he's, how's it going? He keeps it short, but he keeps it sweet. You doing good? Just a thumbs up. Just, man, that stuff goes so far. It's like being at your day job. If people, a lot of owners think or bosses think that, well, you're getting paid, that's enough. No, it's when you shoot an email to your employee saying, hey, man, I saw what you did. That was great work. That means a lot more than the money at times.
Sure.
I know it doesn't pay your bills, but it's just a motivational thing and a human to human kind of interaction. Like, but there's so many people out at Transworld that are supportive, and if you don't show up, you have people calling you or messaging you, hey, where were you? What's going on? You know, but so many people I've met, so many Ray's friends, like Jackie, she's been so nice, and Christine, they buy stuff from me, from Ray and I. They bought stuff every year. And then when it's just my company, they're buying stuff. They're just it's endless. I've had repeat customers for years. Ray and I did, and now I do. Now it's like you really start to see some nice stuff in people, so that helps keep you afloat. Because if you went to one of those trade shows and no one talked to you, man, whew, that would be hard.
Yeah,
your stuff sucks, man. Why are
might
you even
be
here?
might be a little hard to keep going if no one says anything, right?
I don't care how long you've been doing something or what you've been doing. You need motivation still.
Sure.
You can get
Sure.
burned out in anything.
Yep. And it's exactly the same way on this side. You need the motivation. You need to
Yeah.
be in with like-minded people who are doing the same thing, going through the same struggles as you are, facing the same trolls and the same good and bad like you are. And that family's great. Family is very important. Friends are. But when you meet people, strangers, that you become not only friends with, but like colleagues with, that
Mhm.
and they don't know you from Adam, it's like that means a lot to get that kind of support and everything else. Um, so where do you envision Henry Monster Designs going from here? What do you think your ultimate goal is, and how do you think you're going to get there?
Um, I think really it's, I don't want to sound like cliche, but it's just the truth. That my goal is to enjoy it and make sure that I'm making stuff that other people. And I made it a point to, when I started my new company, to come up with this idea is make stuff that when people, especially people in the 40 and after crowd, see it, it reminds them of something from their childhood.
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia. It's stuff that's not what I did before, and it's just seasons of life. I did a 180 with my style. You know, Decimation Haunted House and Recreations was gory and bloody and that whatever. My style now is the polar opposite because nostalgia. I want to actually make people smile and not make them go, "Oh my gosh, you're sick. What's wrong with you?" You know, that worked when I was young and whatever. But
Right.
now it's like, nah, let's make people smile, and it can still be, spooky or whatever. Like this guy, it's not the most horrifying thing, but if you saw that in a dark alley, you'd probably run. So
Sure.
it's just for the company. I don't have any goals. It's not my source of income, thank God. But it's just continue relationships with people, share what I make, teach. I think that's a huge thing, actually. Is I want to get into teaching more. Teaching hobbies and talents can help people tremendously in their life. Um, you know, it can give you an avenue. It sounds silly, but it's true. There's a reason why with veterans they get them into art programs, they get them into
Mhm.
um, art classes, things like that, or welding classes, whatever it may be, a trade. It's the same thing. Like, I, if I can teach someone a skill, maybe that suddenly becomes their focus, and they're away from maybe drinking. I mean, it sounds silly, but it can happen. Like, so I want to teach more. I want to get more people learning how to sculpt and stuff, because once you learn the process of the stuff, you can make anything. You don't have to make stuff that looks like this. You can make a Santa Claus, you can make a lawn gnome, you can build your own chair. Like, I don't care. Like, so my goals are not financial. I don't have any. Like, I just want to keep making stuff and enjoying it and make sure other people are enjoying it. Like,
Right.
it's as simple as that. So
Again, kind of relates back to this whole thing that we do. If you're not enjoying it, not having a good time, why are you doing it? What's the point of it? And I really like what you said there. When it comes to giving back, what you said is so true. There are people that find what you do very soothing, the sculpting, the painting, and it can really benefit them in so many ways. So I think that you wanting to give back is really, really cool, man. That's an excellent thing. Um, so I want you to show us a couple more of your things a little more in depth. Give us kind of an idea. Where do you come up with the ideas? Where in your twisted little head do you come up with these ideas and be like, "Hey, this is going to make a cool mask"? What is the thinking and the process with that?
I love that question. It's weird because this is stuff I was like have been just thinking on my own, just literally in like the last few weeks. Not in the context of like, oh, what am I going to say on your show? It's like no, just outside of that, just in general. Like, so all right, so I'll start off with my ideas. So I'm weird with ideas. I used to have the talent of drawing. I haven't done it so many years. I don't know if I can do it anymore. Maybe, but there's so most artists will draw something out. They'll sketch something out. They'll write ideas down. They'll sketch it out, and they'll kind of go. They'll start sculpting out of clay. They'll sculpt that idea they've drawn out. That works for most people. That doesn't work for me because I'm trying to sculpt what I already see, and that frustrates the snot out of me. So my ideas are entirely more vague, and they'll fall. There's two things to it. I know this is like I'm overthinking, but this is what I do. But there's two factors in it. One being what I call a foundational idea, saying, well, what's my foundational idea? Is it a scarecrow? Is it a zombie? It's what you're sculpting. It's okay. Let's say it's a scarecrow. That's my foundational idea. Now, the way I'll build off of it, as opposed to a drawing or things, I'll take notes maybe, but I'll come up with a story. So what I mean by that is maybe the scarecrow has he's missing an eye, and we can see that maybe the burlap's torn out. Why is he missing an eye? What happened? So we're giving him a backstory, giving him a background. Well, you said burlap. Why does he have burlap? So you're like, so the first thing I can do in that sculpt is sculpt that missing eye. So I'm already fueling myself encouragement wise because I've got part of what I wanted down. Then I can say, well, he has a kink in his neck, so he's going to have a tilt. So I'm sculpting a tilt. Okay, so that's kind of what I do. Like, or just say a mummy. Say I sculpted a mummy. Well, how long has he been buried? Was any sunlight coming through the coffin he was buried in? Was he burned? Maybe. Are there maggots and worms gnawing at him? Did they wrap him fully before they put him in his tomb? Does he still have any teeth? How far along in the rot stage is he? You come up with a story. It's a strange philosophy, but that's just what I do. And we did that with Haunted House. There are backstories and why is this room what it is? Well, we could go through and give an answer to everyone. It's not just randomness.
Right.
Because if I have, like I said, if I sculpt or draw something out on paper and try to sculpt something precise, it would be like if I pulled up a picture of Clint Eastwood and say, I need to sculpt Clint Eastwood. Oh my gosh, that's another level. Like that, very few people can do that. And that's not something I ever encourage starting off. But if you're trying to sculpt something that already exists, your own scrutiny towards what you're making is going to be 10 times harder because you have something to compare it to. Right. If I have a mummy in my mind, there's nothing to compare it to. You can say, well, what about the mummy from the Tom Cruise movie or the mummy from the Brendan Fraser movie or whatever it may be? Well, those are different mummies.
It's the mummy from the Dan Henry mind.
That's right. And so no one, they can still criticize like maybe certain things, but most of their criticisms are out the window. And I mean, by that, I mean unfair criticisms. You stupid, look at that nose, But
and you also give each mask a name. Like you said, with the backstory, it's very important. You also give a name that kind of relates to what it is, and saying so it's not really just a process of sculpting or coming up with an idea. It's literally a character for every single thing that you're doing. Why do you? I mean, you've kind of touched on why you think that's so important, but I mean, do you think you could do it any other way if you hadn't come up with a name and what this character's gone through and that whole thing?
Maybe, and the only other way would be like knowing exactly what I want. I'll give you an example here. Assuming I don't knock this stuff over. So this is what?
Snowman.
Exactly. So a snowman's pretty limited, obviously, but what do you see on a traditional snowman? Carrot nose, coal, eyes, and mouth. Can we make it? So my idea here was, can I use those traditional things that everyone sees on red scarf, top hat, which he has somewhere. I don't know where, but somewhere. How can I take those traditional things and actually make it creepy or scary? that's what I come up with. And then the funny part of this is you talk about snow. Well, they always joke about the yellow snow.
You're right. There you go.
So
There you
he's
go.
more like, he's scary, but he's whimsical and he's comedy all in one. But
Right.
people love that.
Right.
So
Well,
that's kind of my answer to that, if that makes sense. If just knowing what you want in the sculpt, like specifically,
yep.
like with a clown, you know, you want that red nose. Okay. You know, stuff like that.
And
So,
that's why that's such a. Let me welcome a couple more people that joined in real quick, Dan. Carlos, T3 Collects, what's up, buddy? And we've got the Vipers Pit also. But it's funny that you. So we always talked about this when you're on the hunt. If you guys know about the human brain, you will know that the part where it's laughter and it's humorous and funny is right next to the part where fear exists. So it makes so much sense to put fear and laughter and stuff that's funny together. And that's, it's funny that you've still carried that over with the yellow snow and that sort of thing. I think that's really smart that you add that in because someone could be someone, you could have that in a haunted house and someone gets terrified of snowman, but then they turn and they're like, "Oh my gosh, he's got yellow snow. A dog pissed on him." It's
exactly right.
it's that sort of thing that just takes it to the next level and takes it to an area where a lot of people, I've seen other mask companies, they do stuff like that, but for it to be that thought out is very impressive, man. Very impressive to me.
Well, thank you. I literally don't know any other way. It's just the way my mind works. I do that with all aspects of life. My thinking is, man, classic overthinker times maybe 10. I don't know. But I mean, at this point too, the lessons I've learned is what you're saying is you learn to make something for everyone. And it can't just be like, let's make it as shocking and scary and violent as we can, because you're going to have a niche crowd there. It's make bits of that, but make something kind of that everyone can appreciate. And you can still say it's scary, but
Sure.
I don't even care if people think these are scary, because that's in the eye of the beholder anyway. Like
Right.
some people are scared of bears, some people are scared of vegetables, some people are scared of flying. That's gonna depend on the person that's seeing it or visiting the haunted attraction. Like,
Mhm.
you could scare the snot out of 100 people in a row, but the 101st person comes in and be like,
Right.
Bush League, this
You're
isn't
not going to
scary.
get
Like,
everybody. Yeah, you're not going to
no,
get everybody.
no.
That's for
So
sure.
you try to just expand your horizons and make something maybe whimsical or cartoony or just something that's just fun. Like, there's nothing wrong with making things that are fun, you know.
Right. Right.
Oh.
How long would you say the process is? And of course, this is going to be different for every single thing that you do based on how difficult it is. What's up, Dre? Dre, thanks for showing up, buddy. Appreciate you being here. Um, Average, what do you think the time allotment between brainstorming an idea to finished product is? How long do you think that process usually lasts?
That's such a classic question. Yeah.
The people want to know, man.
Well, they do. That's actually interesting, because so many people want to know that, and because they legitimately want to know, because they sincerely don't know. And how would they, unless you're doing it? You're not going to know. Even over the years, I've realized if you're doing it how it should be done, the time frame definitely changes. Let me grab an example. All right. So this is just a whimsical, my version of Frankenstein's monster, right? So he's what's called a flat-backed prop, even though there's hair covering, but it's a flat back. So what that means is it's a one-piece mold. So you start with a head, like a foam or resin head, and then you will sculpt on that. So a sculpting process for me, oh gosh, it's hard, because I can literally start sculpting for an hour and then quit and come back to it in 3 days. And you can have a month-long or 2-month-long process. But if you add up all the time, I would say I can have your average sculpt like that I just showed you, 6-8 hours, maybe,
Just for the sculpt.
just for the sculpt and clay.
Okay.
So now this has a bag over it, but this is just a whimsical thing I'm kind of sculpting for a friend. So he's very heavy because clay's heavy, but he's a big sculpture. He's got about 3 or 4 hours right now.
Okay.
I know it didn't read well, but it also depends on what you're sculpting. So you get faster as time goes along. With this type of clay, it's called wet clay. It's the Walt Disney clay. It's a water-based clay. You can fly. you can go quick. But so say on your average sculpture of clay, say it's 8 hours. Say there. Well, when you're done with your sculpture, you have to make a mold of it. So I make molds out of it's a material called Ultra Cal 30. It's a plaster. So it comes in bags powdered like concrete would. And you add water to it. So for a guy like Frankenstein here, he's a what's called a one-piece mold. So it's just one side of a mold.
Right.
That's going to be about, if you do it right, about 3 hours, 4 hours maybe. You have to reinforce it with burlap, and you have to do probably 5 or 6 layers based on how thick you want your mold, because you want your mold thicker so it has more longevity. Then you do what's called the casting process. So when we have our mold done, we clean the clay out of it. It's perfect. We cast. So we dump liquid latex in. It's a material called RD407. It's not the little bottles you see at Walmart that say like makeup latex. Don't ever use that for making masks.
Right.
So casting, there's several methods. The method I've been using more is called dwelling. So what you do is you fill up your mold. It works better with 2-piece molds, but you fill up your mold to the top, and based on where you live, how hot it is, whatever, you leave it there for usually about 3 or 4 hours. And then you dump it out, the excess, and then you got to let that cure, which is about another 10 hours.
I think I lost count at the hours already, man.
Yeah. So you're like, man, when's he going to get to the fun stuff? Exactly. So once that latex is cured, and I mean fully cured, you got to pull it out of the mold. Then you want to let that sit generally. Some people will for a day, but I will let it sit for a couple hours maybe. Well, then I have to go wash it because there's going to be clay residue, plaster residue, an hour. Well, and the time to wash out your mold too. If you have a power washer, it's pretty quick, but maybe say an hour.
Right.
So then you've washed your latex blank, is what it's called when it's not painted. So this guy, if he wasn't painted, would be called a blank. Then you have to trim off the excess flashing. You have to patch any holes. You have to fix things. There's another, or Dremel, 2 hours, 3 hours. If you have to apply more latex and let it dry. Okay, that's insane, Dan. Now we get to the fun stuff. So painting. So I use a technique that's called dry brushing. I don't use airbrushes. That's a common thing in prop and mask making is airbrushes. I don't use those. So I usually use, as the name would allude to, is brushes. So I paint everything literally by hand. So every detail of paint you see on this, it's all done by hand. And so it's not just 1 or 2 layers of paint. It's usually about 5 to 6, 7 colors with usually about 7 or 8 layers of different paint. Then there's detail painting within the mouth or eyes if you have them. But then when that's done, you have a process called a wash, which is done out of ink. And then when that's done, you can seal it with a sealer to protect it from like water and sun. And when that's done, then you can start adding your hair or whatever kind of accessories you want to add. So the painting and all that process and all that's probably another 6 hours to get it from painted to totally finished. So whatever the math is on all of that, it's several days.
I mean, you're looking at several days for what?
Yeah. And all that work, and when I finished all that work, I had 1 mask that's done.
Right.
But the good news is I can make more of that mask now.
Exactly. I was just going to say
the
that.
time.
Yep.
So.
You reuse and become different paint variations. You know, you're like Hasbro. Hasbro's a bad word around here. So sorry, Dan. You're like Hasbro. But
I think I do better paint jobs.
You definitely do.
I don't want to sound cocky, but I think I do.
But I think that's smart in your line of work to reuse your mold because, like you said, the amount of time that you've spent with that, and you want to get the most out of your mold too. We all kind of understand Hasbro's thinking when they say we need to get the most out of our mold because you spent a lot of time when it came to sculpting, casting, cleaning out the mold, washing, all this stuff. So you definitely want to get the most out of that and make sure
there's truth to that, but there reaches a point with their molds, I assume, just like with my molds, where with its being plaster, the more pulls it's taking away plaster every time, so there's less and less detail. Right. So after about 20 pulls, it starts to get kind of in the mediocre range.
Mold degradation. Yep.
Yeah. And so you generally make what's called a master copy that you can just keep remolding.
Yep.
So I guess Hasbro hasn't picked up on that one, maybe.
Well, they have. They just, Carlos is right. That's twice. Hasbro's been brought up on 2 podcasts today, so we got to stop that. General Kenobi's Bunker, what's up, man? Good to see you here. Hope you had a great time at ICCC, man. Guys, if you haven't checked out all of the good General's lives, posts, videos, go check those out. He had a great time at ICCC. I'm really hoping I can join him next year for ICCC. I think that'd be awesome. So glad you had a good time, buddy. Okay, so you've given us a little bit of a tutorial on what it takes. We're going to go a little bit longer with this just because I want to give
As
Dan a
long
little
as
bit
you
more
want.
time. So we'll go probably another 15 minutes. But what are your prices? What do your prices look like? And I want you to tell us about that. Then I want you to tell us about. I know you're working on some videos, so I want you to talk about the videos. But give us an idea of pricing and where you come up with the price for each mask. Is it based on the amount of work? Is it based the amount of detail, materials, and so on?
Yeah, sure. So pricing is that's one thing that will kind of get a lot of the general public, and that's why a lot of vendors like me will go to trade shows where there's more of a perception of why the prices are what they are, because the general public doesn't know, and that's not their fault. They see something in Spirit Halloween or Walmart and think, well, it should be that
Right.
price. Well,
Right.
I'm obviously not busting out cheap stuff out from China. so,
Obviously.
so like a mask like this is what's called a half mask. So you can see it's just a half mask. There's only half of it there. It's just the face, and then the wig is how you put it on, essentially. Something like this is about $100, which is kind of low. Something like this more in the industry is kind of being closer to 110, 120. So like you had said, Yukon is you're adding in your materials, but then the big one is your time. You set an amount of money per hour that you want to charge, and then you however long it takes. And the issue with that can be is if I am being a pain in the butt to myself and a perfectionist, if I take 2 hours longer on a paint job than what was needed, which does happen, then I can't really charge the person. So I have to keep myself in check while providing quality. And especially if they order something off the website, they have to get what they see. You know, they can't order like this variant and then it shows up green. You know, that's but something like a half mask about $100 all the way up to I have full size scarecrows back here. They're closer to $700. These full heads are going to usually be closer to 200. I have a half. Let me pull this guy down. Actually, hopefully I can do it without causing too much chaos. So this guy's a half zombie prop. So he's a half zombie because he's from the waist up. He's what's called foam filled latex. He has movable arms, all sorts of stuff. So something like this is going to be closer to like 350.
Right.
But they come with steel stands. They have PVC or steel frames if you want. But you know, I'm sitting here. I'm applying. Sometimes I'm including like glass eyes. I'm adding hair. I mean, you name it. Like I kind of do it. But yeah, there's your price range. It's maybe not as flattering as some of the retail stores, but it's kind of the old adage of you get what you pay for. So.
Well, exactly. And what everybody the misconception is, oh, I can get, like you said, I can get that at Target or I can get that at Spirit Halloween. It's not custom. Everything you're getting is a custom. Dan takes orders based on what the customer wants. You know, you've done custom orders for people in the past. And again, even if it's something that's on his site, that's not something you can get any other place. That is something Dan made. And it's a custom. You can't go to Target, you can't go to Spirit and get it. It's something that is a one of a kind item, which again, to me, and I'm not biased because of anything, it's worth the money. It's worth the money because you're buying an item that's customized. And there you go. And like Carlos says, super talented Dan, amazed at your quality of work.
Oh, thank you.
Carlos is dead on. Michael Cherry, what's up, man? So yeah, that's what some people, that's what the misconception is. Why am I paying $100 for a mask? Well, yeah, it's something like you can get at Target, but you got to look at this a little deeper and understand that this is actually made by Dan in a customized way. It's not something that you can just replicate. Dan's got the mold. You can go and try if you want to spend the 72 hours we just talked about in the previous segment, but you cannot.
And then near $1,000 in materials.
Right, the materials and everything else. So I think that's the misconception with a lot of this stuff and that sort of thing. It's art. Colin's absolutely right. It's art. People will sit there and they will pay for thousands of dollars when a couple of dudes take Crayola paints and splather it around. It's the
and if it was a gorilla that did it, it goes up to millions.
There you go.
But if an orangutan saying something, look out.
Right,
I
and
need an orangutan.
Carlos is absolutely right. I pay $100 for handmade than retail store.
Yeah.
You pay $100 for a custom handmade mask as opposed to a retail store mask.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Totally. Agree. What was my other question? I totally forgot. I forgot what it was.
It'd be easier to remember if I didn't give such long-winded answers, but
Yeah.
So I think it's something to do with where they can see it, or was that right? I don't remember. Doesn't matter.
This has never happened before. I usually am very good about my questions, and I totally spaced when I was going to do it. Oh! I know what it was. So you said that you're going to start making videos, tutorial videos.
Oh, thank you.
Is that something that? So you do have a YouTube channel. You got like 6 subscribers, so you're like the low man on the totem pole around here, man. But
I focus on
we
Facebook.
judge
I've got like
people on subscribers here. So you're here, and I'm here.
I'm as Ray would say, I'm a plebeian.
I believe you. So
I'm one of the little people.
You're one of the little people.
Yeah, that's cool.
Obviously, I'm playing.
I have almost 3,500 people on Facebook though, so which most are from paid ads, but that's
there you go.
That's the point.
There you go. What is your plan with the videos, the tutorial videos? Is that something that you're going to put on YouTube and kind of see where it goes? If so, we'll definitely pump up your YouTube channel if you want me to.
I mean, I've filmed and deleted those things probably 10 times already.
Welcome to the club.
It's hard for a variety of reasons. One, it's just so much information because I'm starting off by trying to tell people about what materials they need and why they need them and what they do and what they don't do, et cetera, and what the alternatives are. And it's like an intro video. It's like you're like in an hour and a half. It's so hard to cut down, but when you're trying to introduce someone to a creative process, you can't leave things. I can't just do the bullet points. Well, everything's a bullet point. Like if I forget to tell someone that they need clay, like they're, so I'm working on those. I'll probably put them on my YouTube, I guess.
Okay. Because they want to see it. Kenobi said yes, tutorials. These guys, they want to. I think people would be very interested in that. Is it something maybe that where you can just give? Let me give you something. A lot of times, what people will do, they'll show what they're using. They'll put a link to it and say, "This is where you can find out more information about this." Like your clay. I think people are really interested in the process, like what you outlined before, between the sculpting, the casting, the painting, and then the final product. So do you think that that's something that we can expect soon?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. Definitely. Yeah. No, yeah. You're right. I had mentioned that earlier, like in the idea of teaching, and that certainly falls in to teaching is videos. So yeah, and I've promised quite a few people through Facebook and stuff that I was going to do that, and it's important to share a talent, and so
Absolutely.
So yeah, that'll be there, and I'm going to really focus on. See, there's not one area you can't focus on, and that's what's so hard. Is every important of the step of the process is equally as important as the last or the next. Right. So, but I will have videos on materials, which I'll try to cut way down. But I'm going to do videos on sculpting and kind of the basics, if you will, making a mold, because that's the most frustrating part of the whole thing. Casting, and then painting. And I think the painting one is the ones that people really like, because you see something that's. Yep. Let me. Yeah, here we go. You see something. Sorry, you see something that's unpainted, and you're like, well, how in the heck does it go? These aren't the same mask, but just as a comparison, how does it go from this to this?
Right.
Because this is like, okay, no one cares, but this is like, oh, that's cool. So I got to have videos for that and showing people the quote exciting parts, which is painting. That's everyone's favorite.
Sure. Guys, I just dropped his YouTube channel in the chat. We'll also put it on the description once the live's done and stuff. So I'll be sure to put that in the description. And your website, of course, we'll put that on. So if you guys are interested in buying any masks from Dan, please let him know. Definitely would recommend it. If you want something cool, if you want something that's custom, that's hand painted, hand worked, definitely give Dan a look. No matter, even if you're just doing it for Halloween, even if you're doing it just as there's a lot of guys in here too that are really into horror, that are into all that stuff. Colin, thank you very much. Colin just subbed to you, so there you go.
Oh, thank you.
Your sub count went up. But
Yes.
yeah, even if you just want a cool piece to like put on a foam head, honestly, Dan's made me stuff in the past where I've kept things. I used to be his main man with the haunt. I was the lead actor and kept some of that stuff before. So it makes great collectible pieces as well, guys. So if you're interested, please check him out. Let him know, and we'll be sure to get you guys going with that. So
And I will mention though, since you are with, I know there's a large toys and collectibles crowd on here. I do have a skull prop on there that I have a Skeletor variant of.
oh,
So it's
there
on the
you go.
website. So you won't see the word Skeletor, but you'll know it when you see it. So
Yep.
that one, that's been pretty popular.
Nice, yeah. So guys, definitely do it and do that. So, um, obviously we're brothers. We could sit here and talk all day, but we're not going to do that.
I got all night. Yeah.
Just in the interest of the show and everything else. So, but thank you, Dan, for being on here. Really appreciate you being on here, man. I think it's a great change of pace. Definitely have you back on to talk more about this. Let me get back to one of T3's questions real quick before we
Yes.
stop because he missed it. Talk one more time about the conventions that you've done in the past, just real quick. He's kind of interested what conventions you go to sell your work.
Oh, sure. So really the only convention I do now is what's called the Trans World Haunted Attraction and Halloween Show. It's out in St. Louis every year in March usually. It runs Thursday through Sunday. It is not generally open to the public. However, you can sign up as a enthusiast, or if you work for a company of some sort. I mean, you can get in there. But so that's like the trade show of all trade shows. Like that's one that's not just national but worldwide. They have people showing up from Australia, England, the UK, Canada, Puerto Rico, Brazil. I've sold to people from Spain. So I don't even know what the square footage is at the America Center out in St. Louis, but it's absolutely massive. There's hundreds and hundreds of vendors making anything you can think of, whether it's masks, it's props, it's makeup, it's sets, giant 20, 30 feet props, like I was kind of talking about earlier. And the artistry is just mind-boggling. There's set designers out there. There's people from Hollywood out there, professional makeup artists, professional sculptors. I mean, celebrities, things like that. And yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It's gone on for, I don't even know, 20, 30 some years. But yeah, that's the main one. There's other little ones like Midwest Hunters Convention. I think it's in Chicago. That one is open to the public. That's happening actually, I think, in a week or two. It's put on by the same people that put on the St. Louis one. Then there's other little conventions you can go to. Like they just had the Texas Frightmare Weekend and Fright in Texas. I think it was this weekend. There's dozens and dozens of conventions all over. There's a Fear Expo out in Kentucky, which is a newer show. There's Haunt Con, which is going to be in Florida this next year. There's so many. If you Google something like haunted house conventions, you're going to see a ton of them. And all but Trans World in St. Louis are open to the public. So.
Yep. Couple more things here real quick. Chris, everything's plastic. What's up, man? Dude, don't worry about being late. Just appreciate you being on the show, buddy. So here's an interesting question for you, Dan. What's the most difficult mask you've ever put together? I mean, you've done thousands of these things, so that's a good question.
That's a fantastic question. Ooh, man, the most difficult. So I know. Well, there's been times where I've thrown my sculpt across the room, but that doesn't answer the question. The most difficult one, boy, man, that's a great question. I would say, one that gives me fits, probably this prop up here. So this is 2 jack-o'-lanterns. It's a play on like The when you like the theatrical poster that you see where it's like the
Can you hold
laughter
it
and the
up a little bit?
tragedy faces. Oh
Hold,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
there you
like
go.
the laughter and tragedy faces.
Right.
So
Oh,
this Jack Lantern's more messed up. He's scary. This one's just smiling. He's more clean. It's
nice.
one piece prop, but you have to foam fill this by hand, which I know does not make sense. But you have to pour the foam in and take your hand with a glove and move it around because you don't want to fill up the whole thing. It's very intricate. But and I made a. This may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but I made a one piece mold out of it, which is an absolute nightmare. It's very heavy. Plaster is very heavy. But this one gives me huge fits. But I think the most frustrating one is it's way over there, but I have this bigger jack-o'-lantern prop. It's so big that after pulling a few of them out of my mold, I literally destroyed my mold. Literally plaster pieces. So
Oh,
there's certain ones there's a thing that's called undercuts in your sculpt where if you go like a chin, usually if there's like a big area under here, hence the term undercut, the plaster gets under there, and then when you're trying to pull it out of the mold, you can break that chunk of plaster with
and
your piece.
your mold screwed.
So yeah, and if your mold screwed, you have nothing. So, but that's a great question. And honestly, it's like the bigger props take more time, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're like angering me necessarily. But
Yeah. No, great question, man. That yeah, I don't think I've even asked you that. That's a great
no,
question.
I don't even know if I've ever thought of it, but that's actually a
Yeah,
really good question. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, man. Really appreciate you being on. Definitely want to have you back later in the summer, and we'll talk some more about this. We'll talk a little more. We'll actually talk a little bit about more about some faith stuff. I really want to get into that with you.
Yeah.
Dan, like myself, is a huge believer in God, a huge believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. So we're going to actually talk about that some more. How we were raised and that sort of thing. So stay tuned for that. I really want to do that. Him and I have talked about that before. So we're definitely going to get into that next time you're on and go from there. But I think we kind of touched base on this. But do me a favor, plug your shit. Tell me where we can find you, what you're doing.
Oh.
I stole Archer's thing on that. He tells all his guests that, so I stole it.
Oh,
I stole it.
as long as you give credit. Yeah. The P you in
But
court.
just tell us where we can find your stuff. Somebody wants to buy something, somebody wants to sub, and kind of where we can find you: Facebook, Instagram, all those things.
Sure, absolutely. So my website that I built is henrymonsterdesigns.com. Henry spelled the same way as my last name on there. Um, and then yeah, that's henrymonsterdesigns.com. I'm most active on Facebook. So if you just search Henry Monster Designs, my page should show up. The profile picture is the same as in the start of the show that Phil posted, just the little mummy. So you'll see that there. And you already posted my YouTube. I don't even know the URL to that, but Henry Monster Designs. I do have a Instagram, but I don't use Instagram really at all. So if you request a follow, I may or may I don't know. But Facebook is where I'm most active. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thanks for having me, Yukon
Yeah.
Phil. Oh, and I thought of one thing also. I live in Evans, Colorado. So should I be Evans Dan?
Shut up.
Oh, I didn't know. But and just since you said it already, I'll just be quick. As far as the faith things go, as important and fun as all this stuff is, which it is, it's not why I wake up in the morning. It's not my main motivation in life. Christ is my main motivation, and he's the one that, if you'll watch this whole video, I'm talking about being humbled. He's the one that's humbled me and made me better. So as fun as this stuff is, it's God that counts and family. So I just want everyone to realize that this is important, but it's not that important.
Absolutely. And many people have asked me this. The whole reason that the name says Yukon Phil is because of you.
Just when is there a back? Have you told them where that came
I told
from?
him you started calling me Phil one day for no reason, so I just used
Yeah. Well, our uncles used to do that. So my uncle Jeff used to call. Well, I think he still maybe used to call our uncle Mark Jack.
it for
Just
no
we
reason.
don't know why. Same thing.
So we
So
adopted that. And
anyway.
there you go. All right.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So next week, guys, Brett from Collecting with Cool will be on. We're going to be talking a lot of Star Wars. So stay tuned for that. Week after, you've seen him in the chat. Carlos, will be on the 11th, and the week after, I believe The Man Collects will be on the 18th. I got to check the schedule. I think that's what we got. But guys, we're all the way booked through the end of July, which is an awesome problem to have. So happy that everybody's being responsive. We've got a couple of guests that are coming on for a second time. But hey, appreciate the support. Appreciate all you guys being here for Dan. Check out his stuff. I know this one was a little different, but I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. So, you guys in
Different
the
type of
chat,
toy.
right? Different type of toy. Exactly, exactly. You guys in the chat, thanks for being here. Appreciate it, Dan. Thank you again, and we will see you
Thank you.
guys next week. You guys have a good week. We'll see you soon.